when my daughter Rachel insisted I move into her beautiful Victorian home in Portland after my wife's passing. I thought God had finally given me peace in my final chapter. But every night at exactly 2:15 inches the morning, I heard footsteps descending to the basement. One night, I followed those footsteps down the creaking stairs and discovered something that shattered every belief I held about my own flesh and blood. What I witnessed in that cold basement didn't just break my heart. It revealed a conspiracy that had been building for months, designed to strip away everything I'd worked 68 years to build. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and whether you would have had the courage to follow those midnight footsteps into the darkness. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after Margaret's funeral. I was sitting in our empty living room in Boise, staring at her reading chair, when Rachel's voice filled the silence. "Daddy, you can't keep living alone in that big house. It's not safe. What if something happens and nobody's there to help?" My daughter had always been the practical one. At 42, she'd built a successful interior design business, married a prominent real estate developer named Victor, and raised 2 beautiful grandchildren I barely got to see. "I'm managing fine, sweetheart, just taking things one day at a time." Victor and I talked about it. "We have that gorgeous guest suite on the main floor. Private bathroom, garden view, everything you need. The kids miss their grandpa." The mention of my grandchildren, Emma and little James, weakened my resistance. Since Margaret's death, the house felt like a museum of memories I wasn't ready to face alone. "Please, Daddy, let us take care of you. Mom would have wanted this." That last sentence sealed my fate. Margaret had always worried about me, always said I was too stubborn to ask for help. Maybe moving to Portland was the right choice. Maybe surrounded by family, the grief wouldn't cut so deep. 2 weeks later, I watched the moving truck pull away from the home where I'd raised my daughter and spent 43 years with my wife. The drive to Portland took 9 hours, plenty of time to convince myself I was making the right decision. Rachel's home exceeded every expectation. The Victorian architecture featured original hardwood floors, bay windows overlooking a meticulously landscaped garden, and the kind of craftsmanship you rarely see in modern construction. My suite occupied the entire east wing of the main floor, complete with a sitting area and French doors leading to a private patio. "Welcome home, Dad." Victor greeted me with a firm handshake and what seemed like genuine warmth. He was a tall man, silver-haired at 50, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to closing deals and commanding rooms. Emma and James nearly knocked me over with their enthusiasm. "Grandpa, we made you cookies." The 8-year-old and 6-year-old dragged me toward the kitchen, their excitement infectious. That first week felt like healing. Rachel prepared elaborate dinners, Victor engaged me in conversations about investments and market trends, and the grandchildren filled every spare moment with laughter. For the first time since Margaret's death, I slept through the night without dreaming of hospital rooms and final goodbyes. But paradise, I would learn, often conceals serpents. The subtle changes began during my second week. Rachel's smile seemed increasingly forced, her eyes carrying a weight she tried to hide behind cheerful conversation. She flinched when Victor entered rooms unexpectedly, a small movement most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed. 40 years as a forensic accountant had trained me to detect inconsistencies, the tiny details that reveal larger truths. Something was wrong in this beautiful house, and I intended to find out what. Victor's behavior shifted as well. His initial warmth cooled into distant politeness. He'd returned from work late, disappearing into his home office for hours. When he emerged, tension seemed to radiate from him like heat from asphalt. "Everything okay with work, son?" I asked one evening. "Fine, just busy." His clipped response discouraged further inquiry. Rachel touched her wrist unconsciously as she served dinner, pulling her sleeve down over what looked like a fresh bruise. When she caught me looking, she laughed nervously. "Bumped it on the car door this morning. I'm so clumsy lately." But the bruise wrapped around her wrist like fingers had gripped too tightly. Car doors don't leave marks like that. That Thursday night, something woke me at 2:15 inches the morning. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling, a disturbance in the house's rhythm. I lay still, listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, heading toward the basement stairs. The basement. Victor had mentioned it briefly during my tour, calling it his workshop and storage area. Off limits due to power tools and chemicals, he'd explained. Nothing interesting down there. The footsteps descended, each creak of the old stairs distinct in the night's silence. Then, nothing. Just the house settling around me. Sleep was impossible after that. I lay awake until dawn, wondering what business required attention at 2:15 inches the morning, and why someone would need such secrecy in their own home. The next night, the footsteps returned at exactly the same time. And the night after that, by the fourth night, the pattern was undeniable. Someone in this house had a midnight ritual, and they were taking great pains to keep it hidden. During daylight hours, I watched more carefully. Rachel wore long sleeves despite the warm weather. She startled easily, especially when Victor spoke sharply. Her interactions with him carried an undercurrent of fear that she masked with practiced cheerfulness. The grandchildren seemed oblivious, still happy and energetic. But I caught Emma watching her parents with confusion in her young eyes, sensing something she couldn't articulate. Victor, meanwhile, had grown increasingly interested in my finances. Casual questions about my retirement accounts, my property in Boise, my investment portfolio. "Dad," he said one evening, "I've been meaning to talk to you about estate planning. At your age, it's important to have everything in order. We should meet with my attorney, get your affairs organized. I've already handled my estate planning. Margaret and I took care of everything years ago." "Right, but circumstances change. You're living here now, part of our household. It makes sense to consolidate, simplify things. My guy specializes in elder care planning, very thorough. Something about his insistence set off alarms in my mind. In my career, I'd investigated hundreds of financial crimes. This felt familiar, too familiar. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Don't wait too long, Dad. These things are time-sensitive." That night, I made a decision. I was going to follow those footsteps. At 2:10, I positioned myself in the hallway, hidden in the shadows near a decorative alcove. The house was completely dark, every light extinguished. I waited, barely breathing, my heart pounding against my ribs. At exactly 2:15, Victor's bedroom door opened. He emerged fully dressed, moving with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey many times. He passed within feet of my hiding spot, never suspecting he was being watched. I followed at a distance, grateful for the soft slippers Margaret had given me years ago. The basement door opened with a faint squeak, and Victor descended. I waited 30 seconds, then crept to the top of the stairs. Voices drifted up from below. Victor's deep baritone, and someone else, a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Professional, clipped, discussing numbers and timelines. I descended 3 steps. Enough to see without being seen. Victor stood at a workbench, covered not with tools, but with documents. A laptop cast blue light across his face as he spoke into his phone. "The cognitive evaluation is scheduled for next week. I've got Dr. Harrison lined up. He owes me from the Riverside development deal. He'll document whatever symptoms we need." The woman's voice came through the speaker. "And the daughter? She's compliant. Knows what happens if she isn't. The property transfer documents are ready. Once we establish his mental incompetence, the Boise house goes into the trust I control. His investment accounts follow." My legs nearly buckled. I gripped the stair railing, fighting to stay silent as my world collapsed around me. The timeline. I need everything finalized by March. My investors are getting impatient, and I need that liquidity to cover the East Side project losses. How much are we talking? His total assets? Roughly $2.3 million. Enough to fill the hole and keep the creditors quiet. And if he resists? If he questions the competency ruling? Victor's laugh was cold. He's a grieving old man, living in my house, eating my food, dependent on my goodwill. Who's going to believe him over a respected businessman and his concerned daughter? I retreated up the stairs on shaking legs, somehow making it back to my room without being detected. The door closed silently behind me, and I collapsed onto my bed, mind reeling. My daughter, my own Rachel. complicit in a scheme to steal my life's savings, to have me declared mentally incompetent, to strip away every right I'd spent 68 years earning. But that phrase haunted me. She's compliant, knows what happens if she isn't. What had Victor threatened her with? What hold did he have over my daughter that made her participate in this betrayal? Sleep was impossible. I spent the remaining hours until dawn planning my next moves. Confronting them directly would be catastrophic. Victor was clearly dangerous, and Rachel was somehow trapped. I needed evidence, allies, and a strategy. Most importantly, I needed to understand what was really happening in this house. The next morning, I watched Rachel with new eyes. The way she monitored Victor's moods, the relief when he left for work, the tension that crept back into her shoulders when evening approached. This wasn't the daughter I'd raised. This was a woman living in fear. I waited until Victor's car disappeared down the street before approaching her. "Rachel, honey, can we talk?" She looked up from the dishes, and for just a moment, I saw desperation in her eyes before the mask slid back into place. "Of course, Daddy. What about?" I took her hands in mine, feeling them tremble. "Sweetheart, I know something's wrong. You can tell me. Whatever it is, whatever's happening in this house, you can trust me." Her composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of suppressed fear broke through her defenses. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want any of this. He made me. He said if I didn't cooperate." She couldn't finish. I pulled my daughter into my arms as she sobbed against my chest, the same way she'd cried as a child when the world became too overwhelming. The story emerged in fragments over the next hour. Victor's real estate empire was a house of cards, built on over-leveraged investments and borrowed money. When the market shifted, his losses mounted into the millions. He needed capital desperately, and my assets represented the perfect solution. But it was worse than financial manipulation. Victor had been controlling Rachel for years, isolating her from friends, monitoring her communications, using the children as leverage. The bruises I'd noticed were just the visible evidence of a much deeper pattern of abuse. He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure I never saw Emma and James again. She whispered. "He has connections, lawyers, judges who owe him favors. He said he'd destroy me in court, prove I was an unfit mother. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "He monitors everything, Daddy. My phone, my email, the security cameras in this house. I couldn't risk him finding out." The security cameras. My blood ran cold. If Victor reviewed the footage, he might have seen me following him to the basement. "I need to check something. Where's the security system hub?" "His office. But it's always locked when he's not here." The lock, as it turned out, wasn't sophisticated enough to stop a man who'd spent 40 years uncovering hidden financial crimes. A credit card and 3 minutes of patience gained me entry to Victor's private domain. His computer was password protected, but the physical files told a damning story. Forged documents bearing my signature. Medical evaluation forms from Dr. Harrison, already filled out with fabricated symptoms of dementia. Property transfer paperwork that would give Victor complete control of my Boise home. And most chilling, a detailed timeline that ended with my assets being liquidated by spring. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully replaced each document. Victor couldn't know I was aware of his plans. Not yet. That evening, I made a call to an old colleague from my accounting days. Frank Reeves had retired from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit 3 years ago, but he still had contacts in every law enforcement agency on the West Coast. "Walter, good to hear from you. How's Portland treating you?" "Frank, I need help. I'm in trouble, and so is my daughter." He listened without interruption as I explained everything. When I finished, the silence stretched for several seconds. "This is serious, Walter. You're describing elder abuse, financial fraud, forgery, and domestic violence. We need to build a case that will stick. What do I need to do?" "Document everything. Record conversations if Oregon law allows it. Get Rachel's statement on video. And find out more about this Dr. Harrison. If he's willing to falsify medical evaluations, he's probably done it before." The next 2 weeks became an undercover operation conducted within the walls of my daughter's home. I purchased a small recording device from an electronics store, testing it during Victor's work hours. Rachel, finally seeing hope for escape, became my partner in gathering evidence. We discovered that Victor's cruelty had a schedule. The 2:15 basement meetings happened every Tuesday and Thursday, always with the same mysterious woman whose voice I'd heard that first night. Rachel identified her as Melissa Chen, Victor's attorney, and apparent co-conspirator in the fraud scheme. We documented the bruises Rachel concealed beneath long sleeves. We photographed Victor's threatening text messages, the ones he sent when she did anything that displeased him. We recorded his conversations about my incompetency, his discussions with Melissa about asset transfers, his cold calculations about when to act. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Emma, my 8-year-old granddaughter, knocked on my door one afternoon with a drawing clutched in her small hands. "Grandpa, I made this for you, but I need to tell you something first." "What is it, sweetheart?" She looked around nervously, checking that we were alone. "Mommy cries sometimes when Daddy's not looking, and Daddy yells at her when he thinks we're asleep." "I don't like it, Grandpa." "It scares me." My heart shattered and rebuilt itself in that moment. Even the children knew. Even innocent Emma had sensed the darkness in her home. I kneeled down to her level. "Emma, I'm going to fix this. Grandpa's going to make sure Mommy doesn't have to cry anymore. Can you trust me?" She nodded solemnly. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, sweet girl. More than you know." Frank's investigation turned up crucial information. Dr. Harrison had faced complaints before. 2 previous cases where elderly patients claimed he'd falsified medical evaluations at family members' requests. Both cases had been settled quietly, records sealed. But Frank's contacts found patterns, enough to establish Harrison's willingness to compromise his medical ethics for the right price. Melissa Chen's background was equally damning. She'd been disciplined by the Oregon State Bar for ethical violations and had represented clients in multiple elder abuse cases, always on the side of the alleged abusers. Victor's financial situation was even worse than I'd overheard. He owed over $4 million to various creditors, with several loans approaching default. My $2.3 million would barely cover half his debts. He was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. The confrontation had to be handled carefully. Frank connected me with Detective Maria Santos from Portland PD's Elder Abuse Unit and Special Agent Thomas Wright from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Together, we developed a plan that would protect Rachel and the children while ensuring Victor faced justice. The day arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon. Victor came home to find me sitting in his living room, surrounded by law enforcement officers. "What the hell is this?" His face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally, fear. "Victor Harrison." Detective Santos stepped forward. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, financial fraud, forgery, and domestic violence." "This is ridiculous." "Whatever this old man told you." "Mr. Price," Agent Wright interrupted, "we have recordings of your conversations with Melissa Chen discussing fraudulent competency evaluations. We have documented evidence of forged signatures on property transfer documents. We have photographs of injuries you inflicted on your wife. And we have testimony from your intended victim." Victor's eyes found mine, and I saw the moment he realized his scheme had collapsed. "You're making a mistake. My lawyers will." "Your lawyer is currently being arrested at her office." Detective Santos produced handcuffs. "Please turn around." As they led Victor away, I turned to find Rachel standing in the doorway, Emma and James clutching her hands. For the first time in years, my daughter's eyes held hope instead of fear. "Daddy," she whispered, "thank you. Some battles require wisdom rather than strength." At 68, I'd learned that patience and careful planning defeat brute force every time. Victor had underestimated me because of my age. He'd assumed that grief had dulled my mind, that dependency had weakened my will. He was wrong. The trial concluded 4 months later. Victor received 8 years in federal prison for fraud and financial crimes, plus additional time for domestic violence charges. Melissa Chen lost her law license and faced her own criminal proceedings. Dr. Harrison's medical license was revoked permanently. Rachel filed for divorce the day after Victor's arrest. The court awarded her full custody of Emma and James, the house, and a substantial portion of Victor's remaining legitimate assets. It wasn't enough to undo years of abuse, but it was a foundation for rebuilding. We sold the Portland house 6 months later. Too many bad memories lived within those Victorian walls. Rachel used her share to purchase a modest home in Bend, Oregon, close enough for regular visits, but far enough for a fresh start. I moved into a small cottage 3 blocks away, close enough to help with the grandchildren, far enough to give Rachel her independence. On clear mornings, Emma and James walk over for pancakes, filling my kitchen with laughter that heals old wounds. Last Thanksgiving, we gathered around Rachel's new dining table. The turkey was slightly overcooked, the mashed potatoes a bit lumpy, but the love filling that room was perfect. James said grace, thanking God for Grandpa and new beginnings. Emma announced she wanted to be a detective when she grew up, just like the nice lady who helped us. Rachel squeezed my hand across the table. Daddy, I don't know how to thank you for everything. I looked at my daughter, finally free after years of captivity. I looked at my grandchildren, innocent and hopeful for the future. I thought about Margaret, about the strength she'd always said I possessed, even when I doubted myself. You don't have to thank me, sweetheart. This is what family does. We protect each other. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn. I spent 68 years believing that age meant weakness, that growing old meant growing powerless. Victor certainly believed that. He saw a grieving widower, alone and vulnerable, the perfect target for his schemes. But he forgot something essential. 68 years of living means 68 years of learning. Every challenge survived, every problem solved, every crisis navigated adds tools to your arsenal. The wisdom we accumulate doesn't diminish with age. It sharpens. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences, your own victories over those who underestimated you, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove one truth above all others. Never mistake gray hair for weakness. We've earned every strand through battles you can't imagine, and we're just getting started.